Now let's head to the outdoors and let's see what nature is offering us up at this time of the year, or just let's get a little glimpse as to what we can look out for, what we should be enjoying, what we can be appreciating that's around us every day, and not just during this crisis. Angus Kennedy of Nature Northwest joins us on the line. Angus, good afternoon to you.
Hiya, John. How are you?
Not so bad. Now, we're going to chat about a couple of birds first of all, and the first one, the goldcrest, is actually the smallest breeding bird in Ireland.
It's our smallest
Tiny.
bird. It's an amazing little thing. If you have a 20-cent coin anywhere around you or in your pocket, dig it out and pop it into your hand. This little bird weighs less than a 20-cent coin. And they're amazing. They're so small they're hardly there at all. They're about the size of a golf ball. Even smaller than the little wren. But they're pretty common in Ireland. They're throughout an awful lot of Ireland, and certainly throughout Donegal. They like conifer trees. They like the tall evergreen trees, because those evergreen leaves host all sorts of tiny little bugs, which they like to eat. And amazingly, for such a small, tiny bird, our population is bolstered in the wintertime by birds that come all the way from as far as Russia. And they migrate all the way down across Europe trying to escape the cold and looking for bugs.
So
and
they're
this time of year, of course, they're setting up for a family.
They're a toughie then for their size. And they like being up high. I mean, for a bird that size and weight, they actually like being up high as well.
Yeah, so it's not the kind of thing you'll see on your bird feeder or skulking around underneath the bushes, or like the wren, one of the other very small birds, which is often very low and nests very low. These guys, you're right, they like to go high. Having said that, this time of year is a great time of year for looking for these kind of things, because there's an awful lot of bugs waking up. The birds are really active. They're trying to eat as much as they can to get to build up their protein stores, so they're going to be producing eggs soon, of course. But the leaves aren't out in the trees, and that's the thing. April is a great month for this kind of thing. Some of the trees have woken up from their winter slumber and are starting to go into leaf. A lot of them are still firmly shut. So only the other day, out of my office window here in the home, I saw a little goldcrest. And you can often tell them because they move, they seem to move at least faster than any other bird. They're constantly on the move. Yeah. Never stop.
And I suppose given their metabolism, they have to be on the go all the time.
They have to be on the go. Winter is particularly tough for them, and they die in big numbers, as do a lot of the kind of smaller creatures like that, because the day is so short in the winter. They've only got a few hours, and they need to eat up to 2 times their body weight. And the little goldcrest, it's amazing. They eat a huge amount every single day just to try and put on enough fat layers to shiver their way through the night. But this time of year, it's all about breeding season. I might play their song for you, actually.
Yeah.
If you can hear it now, it's very high pitched. It's a very high frequency. Not everybody might be able to hear it. And people liken it to a squeaky wheelbarrow. Hang on, we'll play it here now. Were you able to hear that okay?
Just about. This could be the high frequency in my hearing, you know. But so yeah, a squeaky wheelbarrow would be a good description, right enough.
Yeah, and I was in a conversation with some people earlier on this morning. There's a group of people with green schools that I work with, and we're looking at, we're trying to learn or teach everybody a new bird song every week. It's great fun, and people are coming up with their own observations. And they were trying to figure out the best time of the day to listen to the birds. I like, when I'm listening to birds like that, to go out in the evening time, to find myself a nice little spot under a tree somewhere, sit down somewhere comfy like that and wrap up, and then stay still. And after about 10-15 minutes, the birds have forgotten you're there, and you'll often hear that little fellow. And the reason I like the evening time more than the morning is because there's not as many singing. They sing a bit more sporadically, but still most of them will announce their presence, and so you can pick out their tunes. Whereas early in the morning, at this time of year onwards, an awful lot of birds are singing all at once, and it's hard to distinguish that really high-pitched little squeaky wheelbarrow song of the goldcrest.
The birds around our house seem to be more active in the morning than they are in the latter part of the day. Is that common?
That is, yeah, morning and evening is when they're going to feed the most and the rest. And this time of year, morning time is very active time. The dawn chorus will be, well, it's already started really, and will just increase and increase when they sing and announce their presence, which proclaims their territory really. It's how they mark out their territory to other rivals. And their strength strengthen their breeding bonds. A lot of the birds do that. Most of our smaller garden birds do that. And then once it's bright enough, they'll start foraging. So a lot of them are foraging and up and at it before we're out of bed at all. The early bird gets the worm. Having said that, you'll still get a lot of activity later on in the day, but it's easier to spot because it's not quite as frantic.
Okay. Now, another very common bird and a very familiar bird, because it would be down, down a bit lower than the gold crest and maybe not move quite as fast, is the common blackbird.
The blackbird is a wonderful bird and is one of my very favourite. Let me just play you this sound. I think this will be a very familiar sound. It's not their song, it's their alarm call. So I'll just play this for you, see if you can hear this. Could you hear that?
Absolutely, yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah.
And so that's a warning of danger.
That's their alarm call, and at this time of year when they're setting up their breeding territories, they'll be in their little area. They'll often make those little sounds. But if there's anything like, say, a sparrowhawk coming in to try and hunt, or say a magpie coming in looking for nests, or a cat skulking down the bottom, even if you can't see those predators, or if you can't see the danger, if you're sitting still in your garden and listening to that, you can often trace where it is, because as the predator moves, say the cat skulks along the hedge in the field behind you, the garden behind you, you'll hear each territory starting to kick off, and the one that's closest will make the biggest noise and the highest pitch and the most alarmed noise, and the other ones will all follow up with a similar call, but they'll be chatting to each other and warning each other of the danger. It's a little kind of community danger call, and it's amazing stuff because you can quite literally trace all the different territories just by that one pack, or by that one little sound if you listen for it.
And end up being quite the chorus. Now, one of the unique things about blackbirds is that the males and females aren't alike.
They aren't alike. So the blackbird is stunning, beautiful black, a shiny black, and has this amazing golden ring around its eye, around its dark, very large, proportionally to the size of its head, around its eyeball, and the bright yellowy orange bill. And the brighter yellow and orange it is, the healthier it is, the stronger it is, and the more attractive it is to its mate. Whereas the female is actually a very dark brown, and it's slightly speckled on the front. Nothing like as speckled as the song thrush or the mistle thrush, but it has slight speckles, which helps with it camouflaging in the hedges and the rest of it. They're very interesting because in the winter time we get a lot of blackbirds that come, and blackbirds are pouring through from all over the country, from Scotland, from northern England. So the chances are the blackbirds that you see in your garden, a lot of them are not the same. There's different ones coming through every day, and they tolerate each other quite well. Whereas at this time of year, they tend to go back to wherever they bred last year. And blackbirds can live for up to 20-odd years. So they can live for a very long time. And so they go back and find the same mate and go back to the same territory, and they won't tolerate other birds as well. They might tolerate another mature male if it's coming into its territory for a bit of feeding, as long as it leaves again quickly. But the younger males, when you hear a lot of squawking going on, chances are that's one of the mature males that's come back to your garden to breed. It's probably been there for years, and it's chasing off any pretenders that are trying to get their territory.
And they're not supposed to hear some other birds about their habitats. They can live in a variety of habitats. Is that right?
Yeah, they can indeed. Yeah. So you will. I have a couple of nests, actually, blackbird nests, which my brother got for me from some of his bushes. Now, my brother lives in Crumlin, and a lot of the little gardens that they have there are covered in paving and all the rest of it. And when you look out of his spare bedroom, he has this little haven. He has bushes, he has blackthorn and wind bushes from up around from our garden. He's got trees, he's got all sorts. So it's created this crazy little habitat where blackbirds normally would like quite a big-ish territory. They are living right beside each other. So they'll go into the little bushes there. And then in the winter time, his bushes are quite thin. The nests tend to get blown out and get destroyed and the rest of it. But they'll go into hedgerows, they'll go into those urban settings in the middle of Crumlin, where it's all concrete, or they'll be nesting in the likes of Ards and Glenveigh and places like that too.
Yeah, they seem to have found their way in urban environments, and you'll often hear them sitting up on aerials or chimney tops and singing away.
Yeah, so much of our nature has adapted to our own way of living. For instance, they think blackbirds only started nesting in Britain, in gardens in Britain, about 100 years ago. And that's probably the same for us. As we've been changing the way that we use the land, as we've been removing hedgerow, removing woodland and whatnot, removing their natural habitat. So, for instance, in Eastern Europe, it's very rare to get them in gardens because they still have a lot of extensive woodlands. So the blackbird likes to hide out in the woodlands there, doesn't need to come into the gardens, whereas here it's managed to adapt itself to our own gardens. And thankfully people have lots of bushes, lots of good hedges, especially in the likes of Donegal, so lots of places for the blackbird to go. And of course they'll eat up various different bugs for you. They'll eat the berries in the autumn time, but worms is their speciality. They love worms, and they're able to find the worms. Amazingly, they find them by sight, but also by listening. And they've done a lot of studies on this recently. That they're able to, when you see the blackbird wandering across your lawn, you'll see its little cocked head. And for a long time there was theories: is this so its eye can hone in on the little worm that's wriggling in the ground or disappearing down its burrow? Because most birds, they can't move their eyeballs like we can, so they need to cock their head one way or the other way to try and get their vision right. Or is this so that they can hear a little bit better? Their ear is hidden behind feathers, it's right behind their eye. And a Canadian study reasonably recently figured out that yes, they can hear because they played the sound of the worm, which is at a very low frequency, the sound of the worm burrowing through the ground. Now you think of that, it's not something we'd be able to pick up at all. But they played this sound, which is at a much lower frequency, and they also played sounds like cars and people and all the kind of urban sounds that we might have outside of our gardens and houses, which are at a higher frequency. And that didn't seem to bother the blackbirds. They were able to ignore all that white noise and still hear that really low frequency rumbling of the earthworm wriggling through the ground, which is quite amazing, really.
Which meant food for them. Now, Texas says, could you ask Angus what his opinion is on installing man-made nest boxes for peregrines in tall buildings like cathedrals and so on? Bringing the peregrine into towns and villages and killing our garden birds. Culling these should be done. Any bird lover doesn't want to see a bird being eaten alive by these predators in the back garden. I keep birds and I'm tortured by these predators. I protect them to the best of my ability.
And it's something I'm often asked. The sparrowhawk, for instance, I'll come back to the peregrine in a second, but the sparrowhawk is our most common bird of prey, and it looks like a small sparrowhawk, or sorry, a small peregrine. It has those white and brown bars in the front and then a kind of brownish back, and they're amazing hunters. But a lot of study that's been done has found that if you have a sparrowhawk that's picking off some of the birds at your bird feeder, it's actually doing you a favour, and more to the point, it's doing the birds a favour in the long term. 9 out of 10 of its hunts aren't successful. So 90% of the time the bird gets away. And the ones that it does pick off are the ones that are a little bit slower to react, aren't quite as good as hiding, aren't quite as good as reacting to everybody else's alarms, because small birds have a specific alarm call for birds of prey. So what they're doing is they're strengthening the gene pool. So the ones that then go and nest in your garden and produce offspring are the mums and dads that have managed to evade a winter of being hunted by the sparrowhawk. And a similar kind of thing could be said for the peregrine. They're a little bit different. They'll go for much bigger birds. So they have started to move into the cities on their own because their habitats are getting destroyed elsewhere. They're getting hunted by various people. Of course, it's highly illegal to do that. But there was only in the last estimate a few hundred pairs, I think it was about 400 or 500 pairs of peregrines in the whole country, which is a terribly sad thing, because they're the fastest fastest creature on the planet. They're amazing things. They can dive or stoop faster than a Formula One racing car, and they go for bigger birds like pigeons. That's what they particularly go for. And the likes of Dublin people are very happy to see them there, because there's lots of pigeons and there's lots of gulls, and they will take out some of the smaller gulls when they get a chance, and they nest high up in the cathedrals and some of the tall buildings, because we've kind of recreated their habitat, which would be cliffs. They normally like tall cliffs, and for instance, they'll get some nesting in some of the cliffs near Glenveigh and places like that, you know. So putting up bird boxes for them, I think, is actually a great thing. The amount of birds that they'll take from your garden, very little. The peregrines won't really come into human contact or into your gardens as much at all, whereas you will get them in the cities taking out the pigeons and the gulls.
Okay. Someone asked about the yellowhammer. What happened to it? Colour hasn't seen one in ages.
Yellowhammer is, unfortunately, it's linked to the declines in so many of our birds, and yellowhammers, which used to be a very common thing when I was small, or in my parents' time, yellowhammer would have been a bird that everybody would have seen all over the countryside. Now, if you look up the yellowhammer on the birdatlas.org maps, birdatlas.org maps, and if you punch that into Google, and you'll find fairly comprehensive maps of where the yellowhammer is. They still have them on the east coast and around the southeast of Ireland, where there's still a lot of arable crops. Yellowhammers, a bit like some of the buntings, the corn bunting, for instance, they love the little seeds, and we've changed that way of farming. We've got rid of that way of growing so many arable crops. And one of the things that has gone with them is the yellowhammer, not completely disappeared, but the corn bunting, which is a kind of similar bird, has gone and hasn't bred in Ireland for the last few years, and we've managed to wipe that out altogether. We don't have to. If we left a little bit of room, if we encouraged, if we helped our landowners to leave a little bit of room for these birds, well, then they would come back. But we need to help people to do that. We need to set up our support systems in a way that it's practical for people to do that.
Incentives. All right, another caller has a blackbird with a white tail in his garden. What could it be?
Well, that can sometimes happen in the blackbirds, all right? You can sometimes get an unusual colouring in them. Sometimes little parts of them can be white, parts of the wings can be white. It's pretty unusual, but it's pretty cool to see. And one of the nice things about that is take a little note of it. Note it down in your diary. I know, talking to a lot of people, there's a lot of people who started keeping diaries now over our lockdown of different nice little things that they see. It helps kind of focus the mind and focus you on what's out and about and happening, the first swallow that might have arrived or whatever. And if you take a note of that bird, and when it comes, there's a good chance, if it's here now, there's a good chance it'll be back every spring. It mightn't necessarily successfully breed, that's the only thing, but I'd be very interested to find out if it does.
And as you have pointed out in the past, a lot of birds are territorial, so the bird that you see today could be the same bird that you see tomorrow and so on.
Yeah, from this time of year. So one of the reasons I want to talk about the blackbird this week in particular was because up until now, blackbirds start singing in around about February time. And when they're singing, as opposed to just that little call, they're marking out their territory. But the birds that sing in February and March are the young males. Last year's males that are now trying to establish a breeding territory. And then the older, wiser males come back in around about end of March, early April time. And they look at these young pretenders and smile to themselves, and they start singing, and they sing a longer song. And the longer the song, the more embellishments to the song, the older the blackbird is, and seemingly the more attractive it is to its mate. They try and keep the same mate year after year. And they will, so the song now gets much richer for the blackbird, and that's it holding its territory. They might even have two nests, unusual in Donegal, but occasionally they can have two nests, quite common down south of the country, where the weather's a little bit warmer. And they'll be here right up until July or so, and they'll be very busy trying to chase off those young pretenders, trying to rob their territory.
Someone else is chatting about larks and hasn't seen them. How do we get them back?
Larks are open fields, arable lands, and they will be on the dunes as well. They come into the open fields and the arable lands in the wintertime. I see them a lot around my area, around between Ramelton, Letterkenny, and those kind of areas in some of the fields, and the stubble fields and whatnot. But at this time of year now, they're already starting to sing in the bogs and the sand dunes, and it's one of the things, once this lockdown finishes, I'm looking forward to, is going for nice walks in the bogs, because the last walk I had in the bog was a few weeks ago, a little more, maybe 4 weeks ago, and there was meadow pipits singing, but I didn't hear any skylarks. And I know that the skylarks will start singing, will have started singing already actually, and they have the longest bird song out of any bird in the world. They can sing for up to 4 minutes.
That's
they go
why it's so
high up
famous.
in the sky and sing and sing. It's amazing things, yeah.
Brilliant. Someone says, how can I get rid of starlings from my shed? I think we touched on this last week as well.
We did, yeah. And I have starlings that are, you need to get some sparrows. And it sounds like a smart answer. I've got starlings and sparrows trying to nest in my house, and there's been a very interesting battle between the starlings and the sparrows. And starlings are much bigger, but there's a lot of the sparrows, and the sparrows have been having a face-off, and they have actually managed to chase out the starlings from underneath the roof, and they've taken over the space themselves. Which means they're tapping at about 5:30, 6 in the morning. It's not as loud as the starlings' tappings, and the starlings have gone into some local bushes, which they'll quite often do. They're protected, unfortunately, once they're in there. You're not allowed to remove them. They're protected by the law. And remember that starling numbers, along with sparrows, and so many of our birds, like the yellowhammers we were just talking about, have really gone down, and an awful lot of their habitats are disappearing. It's one of the reasons that they're coming into these kind of human places. So if if you can tolerate them for the few weeks, yes, they'll make a bit of a mess. Try and put an old sheet or some old cardboard or something just directly underneath their nest. And then next year you can put up some starling boxes for them. You can try and put up some nest boxes and encourage them, or later on in the year.
A texter says, I've noticed a flock of red-winged thrushes around last week getting berries. That's great. And someone else says, why are they still cutting trees up in the forest? The birds not build in pine trees.
Yeah, well, the redwings first, it's I saw somebody posted just this morning. There's a great website, by the way, called irishbirding.com. It's worth having a little look at. And various people put in birds, usually typically unusual birds, not the terribly common birds, but they'll put in the first bird, like the first swallow that arrives. So the swallows have been pouring into the country just over the last few days with these new southerly winds that we're having, which is going to give us warmer weather for the next few days. Actually, we'll hopefully get some lovely weather. And with them, we'll get swallows. The sand martins are already coming in, and some of the other warblers, which we'll talk about over the next few weeks, hopefully. But the redwings are starting to move north. So somebody was reporting just this morning that redwings were spotted at Fanage, right up the top of Fanage. They eat up the berries, they gobble up the berries, but they'll be heading back north very soon, all the way up as far as Scandinavia. Somebody else was on this morning talking about swans, and they heard some swans, I think it was some swans last night over their house, again on the Fanage Peninsula, and they're also starting to move north. So with this great movement north of redwings and swans and geese and all the rest of it are heading north, also the swallows and the other birds are coming north from Africa, from Europe, to join us, which is a great thing.
A texter says, I find if I throw food scraps out in a field now, it's seagulls instead of crows that take them. Where have all the crows gone? I thought there was plenty of crows around.
There's still plenty of crows. The gulls and the crows, those two families are the two, by far the cleverest and most adaptable families of birds that we have here, at least. And you can see that by the way the gulls, herring gulls in particular, the big one with the big yellow beak with the little red spot on it, has taken over an awful lot of the nesting sites in Dublin. When I grew up in Dublin, and go into the likes of Phoenix Park, and the ponds in the middle there would be full of ducks and coot and birds like that. Now they're mostly full of gulls, but a large part of that reason is because the habitat has been compromised for the gulls as well. So they have managed to find a place where there's lots of food. It's most likely there's been some very damp weather over the last few days. We've had all sorts of little bits of rain coming in. I've had a lot of gulls flying over my house too. Suddenly they'll come in little flocks. When the weather gets a little bit drier, they tend to push back out to the coast again. So it's probably just weather connected, and they've probably been the ones to spot it before the crows. But leave out your food and the crows will come too.
Someone has a question about 5G. It's here, and they're wondering, can it affect birds?
Yeah, and this is something that has been asked a good bit recently, and there was a mast going up reasonably close to me, and it's something I was looking at. I contacted Birdwatch Ireland, I contacted Bat Conservation Ireland, and a few other groups like that to try and see was there any scientific evidence, because when you punch into Google 5G and bird health, you will have all sorts of different, very alarming stories. But it's the same for anything that you punch into Google, and there's all sorts of stories one way or the other. But there's no evidence as yet that they do affect. No scientific evidence as yet that they do affect birds. Maybe that will come in time to come. Maybe it won't. I don't know. But at the moment, currently, there's none that I was aware of, or those organisations were aware of.
Okay. And finally, a texter says we saw two white birds this morning. Would they be doves? About the size of a blackbird. One actually was whiter than the other. Any idea?
Possibly. Sometimes doves, which have been released and whatnot, that will be captive, could go. Although you think they'd be a little bit bigger than the blackbird. I wonder. If anybody has any questions like that, what they could do, contact me on either Facebook or Twitter, or on the email address, and they'll see the email address on naturenorthwest.ie, and they have any more details than that, and I'll try and dig that out and figure it out. Need a wee bit more info.
Okay, Angus, we didn't even get to the willow or the primroses. Hopefully next week, but illuminating as always. Thanks a million for joining us.
Yeah, a couple couple of things that are on just worth watching out for if you get a chance. There's a lovely thing called Species of the Day by Biodiversity Ireland. It's on Twitter and Facebook. Biodiversity Ireland Species of the Day. They're putting up some lovely photos of things that you'll see around your own garden. There's also Birdwatch Ireland have a great challenge which is going on to the 11th of April. It's called Stay at Home Challenge, and they've printed it. It's Birdwatch Ireland Cork. If you pop Birdwatch Ireland into Facebook or into Google, you'll get their little sheet. And the other thing which is nice that's happening in my own little town here is the Wild Garlic Table on Facebook. They are starting to do some lovely recipes, and some of the recipes are from wild garlic that you'll find. Not quite yet. It'll be coming out soon, but we'll talk about that again in the future.
Brilliant. Thanks, Angus.
Thanks, John.
Take care. Bye.